Hayden, welcome to the show. I am pumped to have you here. I know you've been doing a little bit of a circuit. You're on the tour with the agent, hooking you up with a bunch of podcasts over the last, I guess it's been maybe started out 2 years ago, kind of went silent, and then you got into probably 3 or 4 in the last couple months.
You could go through periods where you got to do a little work in between the podcast circuit. So, put the podcasting career on pause when kind of started to grow and scale the business. And hey, I'm back on the circuit now, and I saved the best for last. After this podcast, I'm going on hiatus for a little while.
Sweet. Awesome. That'll be good. I'll get a bit more. We will get more viewership.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
That's good. Hey, and you have to do that, right? It's a cycle. We are going to talk about a business today, and if you're always doing this, you're probably not growing the business.
Man, it's those sprints. Everything's a cycle. You get this. I've heard you talk about it before. You got to learn how to go fast and learn how to go slow.
100%. Yeah, it's even this podcast, same thing. Like I've got a day job. We won't talk about that today because it's all about you. But there's times where I had, I think, 6 podcasts already recorded, ready to go, edit it. I was feeling good. And now these days, I think I'm down to 2 ready to release. It's just things pause. You got to be sprinting on something else. That's the way it goes. So how you feeling today? Things going well?
I'm feeling great. Today's a great day. Sun's finally out. Looks like summer's on the horizon. It's a great day. How about you, John? How are you doing?
I'm feeling good, man. It's fun stuff. And I guess for the audience, if you are in Calgary or have been downtown Calgary, most likely you have seen Chad running around in the Plus 15. He does a lot of connections in that. He's chatted about it before. It's something really unique to Calgary, so I wanted to call it out again. But a lot of business happens within these connectors. If people don't know, essentially downtown Calgary, second level, I guess it's 15 feet above surface. I believe that's where the name comes from. There's a connection of many of the buildings, so you can get around during the cold winter months. But a lot of people connect and chat in those hallways. And typically, though, you would have a real thick red beard. And you've trimmed it down, must be for summer. So I'm not going to feel like we're competing today because I'm a little bit longer. But
this is sport mode, John.
Yeah, you're getting geared up. That's it, right? You're going into hibernation on podcasts and focus on the business. Yeah, and most exciting, we'll get into it in a little bit later, but coming off of Galatea, we'll get into what Galatea is, your business, where it started. But most recently, exciting news, you went through the second raise for the business, looking at now a big growth push.
Yeah, I think raising capital is one of the hardest things out there to do, and few people get the opportunity to do it. Learn lots of lessons. I definitely have a playbook of what not to do for sure, but bank account is loaded, and we're looking to go fast now and figure out what that looks like. So that's sort of how we're recalibrating at the moment.
Brilliant. So that's the launch pad from here, and that's good for employees. It's good for your customers too. Know that you got that to start doing some experiments and go harder for them.
Certainly.
Okay, let's pause there. Let's go back to the beginning. On the show, we always want to talk about, it's all about the business owner. So you've been a business owner with Galatea for about 5 years now. Is that correct?
Yeah, July 19th will be 5 years. Crazy to think about it.
Brilliant. Yeah, it goes so fast. And 5 years it's kind of throwing a dart at the wall for me, but it's what I like to kind of target for getting people on 5 years or more. So Galatea was not the first business. I think you are somewhere around 37 now. Is that correct?
You nailed it.
Yeah.
I'll be 30.
Done a little bit of research.
I'm somewhere around that. Yeah.
Okay. Somewhere. Yeah. I'm 40. So somewhere in the same ballpark. I will stay at that age forever now.
Right.
Yeah, totally. So Galatea, and we will get into what is Galatea? What are y'all doing? What hard problems are you working on? But 5 years old, so it would have been 32-ish when you started Galatea. It was you yourself. Now I think you're up to 20 people. But what got you to that point, if you can take us back, to identifying the opportunity to start Galatea? So you're kind of standing at that cliff. You see something that is an opportunity. What is that opportunity and what makes you jump? And if you can, maybe a little bit of background on how you got there.
Yeah, I come from a pretty entrepreneurial family, so this is what I think most people would interpret as crazy. I just think this is normal. Both sides of my family have started businesses, took risks. We've seen businesses work. We've seen businesses fail, and it just started to become normal to me. And I knew at some point in my future, I would quit everything else and go all in on being an entrepreneur. And my whole journey, my family works in energy. We've always worked in energy, and I got my start in energy, young kid working on a rig. It's a fantastic way to see the world and learn about hard work and sort of grit and tenacity, which inevitably makes a good entrepreneur. How did I start Galatea? Well, I just wandered around through these different jobs. I got really lucky. I got the experience early on in my career, the ability to travel. So I've worked all across Western Canada. I spent a couple of years in Denver, Colorado, 4 years in Houston, worked in the Gulf of Mexico for a couple of years,
And this is
worked
all oil
in
and gas
Pennsylvania.
based business that you're doing, or positions that you're working.
Yeah, it's all oil and gas based. And the first part of my career started out on the technical side. So I was really working in engineering teams or working sort of on the software side of it, integrating what happens in the field operations and sort of back office in head office. And then the common denominator that I saw with all entrepreneurs in my family and in my life was they were all just wild storytellers and just salespeople. They were
Yeah.
people that you needed to know and you wanted to be around. And at some point in my career, when I came back from the US, I said, hey, I really got to get serious about this sales thing. Naturally, I'm an introvert. I don't like doing things like this. I don't like talking to people. My energy comes up when I sit in front of a computer and really focus on a hard problem. But I needed to learn it. So I got a job in sales. And then, really, as a salesperson, you're kind of like a little entrepreneur inside a business. You're trying to figure out, what do we have for value? What do we have for product? And how do I convince people to exchange money for either those goods or services? So it was a good way to really learn how to put that together. Now, selling is step one. You got to figure out how to run a business, build a product behind it. But it really gave me a good opportunity to go out and learn how to tell stories and create influence and build relationships with people. So at some point in that journey in sales, I found this amazing opportunity where I saw this massive inefficiency in a market. I saw an industry that had a bunch of tailwinds coming, which were younger generations that like technology. I saw some ESG, environmental social governance policy starting to be formed. And I said, hey, in 5 years, this is going to look really different. And if I can build a business to be at the right place in the right time, there's going to be a good opportunity.
And I think you're right. And you're starting to see that hypothesis develop to be true, obviously.
Don't get me wrong, I made a bunch of wild ass assumptions and bets that we've had to pivot 20 times. But macro level, if we think about motion, we picked the right vector. We're
Yeah.
sort of in the right trajectory for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a common theme through I think every single person I've had on so far. I think this is 12 now. I keep calling it, you got to be in the game to find the opportunities. Like if you're not
Yeah.
in the game doing, like you don't find out where the opportunities are. You don't have the chance to fail, to pivot, to get to like the 18th iteration, which is finally this is product market fit. If you're always on the sidelines, you don't get there.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The business I had sort of off the side of my desk before Galatea, I had a furnace filter subscription service. You don't really need to be in the game for that. Everybody sort of has a furnace filter. How I stumbled into it was, I bought a new house. My wife and I were at Costco and she said, buy furnace filters. I bought the wrong size. I came home and I'm like, this is dumb. Why can't somebody just bring me the right size, drop it on my doorstep when I need to change it? I found a company in the US that did it amazingly. I emailed them and said, hey, you want to come to Canada? And they said, Canada's way too small and way too spread out, not interested. So I said, cool. I'll build a business here in Calgary. And if it makes sense, you can come buy it one day. Never happened, but we
Right.
built a business. We delivered furnace filters for a long time and had some amazing clients. And it was a good way to learn about sort of B2C business and run a bunch of tests.
Right.
Actually, I'm just a curious person. And I've picked up sort of these skills along the way where I can build a website, I can hook it up to Stripe, I can put my credit card info in there and convince somebody to wander onto my website and give me money.
Yeah.
The important thing to do, once you figure out the mechanics of that, really, it removes the barrier of how do I do this? How do I pull it off? We could do it, with a half a case of beer in an afternoon.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And this is Filter Breeze, which I think doesn't exist anymore. It gets sold off, or it's
I'm
project
all
just in
in on
hibernation?
Galatea,
Okay.
John,
You can
for
only do so
sure.
much. You saw this opportunity. You had this crazy idea. You saw a business model in the US that was similar and you started taking action. That's the big step is you started taking action to say, okay, is this feasible? And then I don't think you're, unless your LinkedIn's wrong, but I don't think you're a tech guy by background. Like if I backed up the clock 6, 7 years, sure, you were as techy as your generation is, but like you don't have a programming background or engineering computer background. So what you talked about there, identifying the opportunity and then putting all those pieces together. So you have the website and have Stripe and payment, etc. That was all stuff I'm assuming you didn't know how to do before. Learning along the way to put this together.
Yeah, Google's a magical tool, YouTube videos, all of those sorts of things. If you don't know what to do, but you know where to go look for the answers, you can really figure out anything. And at the end of the day, if you screw up a website, no big deal. You're into it for $20. You just nuke and pave it and get a new one. So I was always really willing to try those things. Now, what do you try? I'm an idea fountain. I've got ideas all the time, and it really comes down to execution.
Yes.
So sort of the mental model I made up for myself was if you take a axis or a chart and you on the one axis you go return, how much money are we going to make, and then effort. I try to do things with the least amount of effort and the biggest returns, right? And when I looked at furnace filters, it's such a monopolistic business. 3M, if you wander into Canadian Tire or Home Depot, a decent furnace filter is $20. But to get the equivalent one manufactured is $3. So the delta between what it's actually being sold on the shelves and the input cost, there's that huge margin. I see a lot of people doing businesses where you look at, sort of what does scale look like and how do you make a living on this? It's an insane amount of effort to get, an $80,000 salary, which is crazy to me. I would never do that.
Yeah.
I always look for those businesses that have really inefficient operations. They've got people who are willing to pay and solve problems that just have that sort of right culmination of a bunch of different variables that make it wise to operate sort of in that realm. And I'm
Yeah.
still trying to figure that out today.
Yeah. And like that's a phenomenal way to think about things. And maybe, maybe you're just blessed with the ability to kind of see these things and always seeking out the answers and putting those pieces together. I don't think it is common for a lot of people to do that, but it's a great way to look at it. And I agree. There are even businesses out there that at the end of the day, after you say everything's said and done, you put all this work into it, you're managing big teams, you're getting a return of, I've seen some businesses like 4%. Like,
Yeah.
you got to think about that in today's market. I know it's different than 4 years ago or 3 years ago, but at 4%, you take your money and put it in something very safe and get 5.5. And that like has no stress.
T-bills, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
When I was in high school, I was on the football team, and one of the businesses, what actually ended up happening was somebody senior in my life asked me to come put up Christmas lights on their house. And I convinced one of the buddies on the football team to come do it with me. And we were like, man, we got a whole football team of people. Why don't we just start hustling these people to start putting up lights? So we handed out flyers, we bought a whole bunch of Christmas lights from Canadian Tire, and got our team just putting up people's Christmas lights.
Awesome.
That was terrible. It was absolutely the worst business ever because you're dealing with a bunch of football people that shouldn't be on ladders trying to put up Christmas lights that they've never, it was just an absolute hot mess express. And it's sort of those failures that you learn, like, all right, I don't want to deal with people. I'm not really interested in doing low margin, high volume stuff.
Yeah.
So you just sort of learn what not to do. And I think it's when you look at investors, a lot of investors will take more risk with second, third time entrepreneurs and founders, and rightly so. That is a good strategy because I'm probably 5 or 6 harebrained ideas in, and I definitely have created some rules in my head on what I shouldn't do, and I had to learn some pretty hard lessons to come up with those rules.
Yeah. You've got those real scars, and you cannot get those by reading 100 books. Subconsciously, you're running with those, and I think that's what investors are thinking, right?
If we were to put two documents on the wall behind your desk, and one of them was a degree from school, an MBA, and the other one was a bankruptcy certificate, you would have learned way more, I guarantee it, from that bankruptcy certificate than you would have from the MBA.
100%, 100%. And I know you've brought this up in at least one other conversation saying, you don't have an MBA. That's totally fine, but you are getting your real life MBA today. And I can't agree with that more I have an MBA. It's good. It's useful for what I use it for. It gives you a way to think about things, tool sets, but going through legal proceedings with businesses, having to shut down businesses, all of those lessons and very stressful fetal position moments, you learn way more, and it hurts way more. But, it's another education.
There's a lot of science and there's a lot of art. There's a lot of models and financials and fundamentals and all of these sorts of things. But then there's also that art. It's the art of building relationships. It's the art of doing deals. It's the art of selling conviction. It's the art of rallying your troops to take on a mission. It's the art of creating artificial times of despair that you can put a rally cry behind and get everybody moving. There's a lot of that art that you can only ever learn it by living it and feeling it and getting that visceral emotion, being in the trenches and being willing to get the exposure on that. I'm 36 years old, but it's taken a lot of risk and a long time for me to build the muscles to be comfortable and actually seek out that forward progress that comes from not being comfortable, or the willingness to not be comfortable.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's good to be always seeking that. And I think through that process too, you get to figure out what you're not good at. In your case, it sounds like you can comment on it, and to do with like process and project management. And maybe I can relate. And you get to figure out what those highs really feel like, achieving those big goals, but also, wow, I'm really good at, X skill set. Maybe I should double down on those. You don't get those from just an education. Not crapping on education here, by the way.
Yeah, and I went to school and took petroleum engineering from State, and it was one of the best programs ever. But I learned by being in the field, by touching, by feeling, by watching, by observing, by being curious. Man, I can't read books anymore. The length of content and the way that my brain works now, just through the way social media and email and everything has changed me. It's hard for me to really focus. I start reading books and my mind starts taking the data out of the books and fixing problems. And then I read 6 pages and just go through the motions to read 6 pages, but didn't even process it. So
I feel you. Yeah. I'm glad other people are thinking the same way. Man, oh man. Right on.
I even have to listen to podcasts on 2x speed so that I'm forced to focus. Right.
So wanted to go back we share something in common, which is back when you were 17, getting out of high school, you went straight to the rigs. You started working probably as a roughneck to start. Then I saw that you were a mudman for a while. That's where I started my career too. And I would not give that up for anything. I wanted to double click on it. Are there lessons, like, would you give that up? Would you do something different if you had to go back?
The biggest risk to society is that young generations don't have that same exposure that you and I had. Those were some of the hardest days. I remember having to stay at some sketchy hotel rooms with a bunch of, it was wild
people. Yeah.
It was so hard, and it wasn't really that hard at the time, but it just created and gave me so much tenacity and grit. I wanted to go home and walk off that rig more than a handful of times, and I didn't, and I stuck with it. You get tough love out there. You're in a job where it's really high risk, especially more when I was working on the rig and as a roughneck. There's a lot of risk around. People take that very seriously. And coming out there as a 17-year-old kid, I led a different first couple of years than most of my friends who, took a summer off or did all this sort of other stuff. And it shaped me into not being afraid to wake up before everyone else and get after it, and hard work and perseverance. I think entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. And the people that have built these billion-dollar businesses, they're not overnight successes. They've been grinding for 20, 30 years. And it's really the perseverance to be on a horse in the race while everyone else got bored and took off. And I think working on a rig gave me that perseverance and that conviction to stick with something and see it through. You find these guys, and I worked with a fellow on the rigs that was a mudman with me, and he wouldn't even take his mud kit out of his truck. He would walk up to the tanks, he'd stick his finger in the shaker box, look at the mud, feel the mud, smell the mud, taste the mud, and be like, okay, go mix this, do this, do this, do this. And he was just so calm, cool, and collected. I knew that over time you just become comfortable to this, and this
Totally.
becomes your realm and your domain, but you have to earn the right to be there. And business is the exact same too. I see these new entrepreneurs that get in their first sort of jam or pile up, and they, do as I did. They just, it's hard to process, and they get in a situation and they try to do what is just normal to them. And what you realize over time is a good entrepreneur, you know, they don't really ride the highs and the lows. They kind of keep even keel in the middle, and they keep that sort of common sense about them and that wit and wisdom about them. And you earn the right in the domain to, as you go through those highs, those peaks, and those troughs, to not really let it affect you as much as
Yeah,
it
that's a
used
good
to.
analogy. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's just getting some, staying on the horse, riding it a little bit longer, and once you live this stuff, you get a maybe thicker skin. But
And you
okay,
almost learn to like it. You almost learn to appreciate the moments of adversity, because you can take a moment of adversity and use it as a way to move something forward.
yeah, I can't agree more. Yeah, I like that analogy, and it's true.
Well, if you're not failing, you're not really pushing hard enough or taking enough risks. I think the best learning has always, for me, came from failure. And as you learn to execute and you get more competent, you fail less. But you need to learn how to take more risk and go out further, where you can find sort of that realm of almost awakening, where you can start to realize your gaps and what you need to work on. It's that constant evolution as a leader and as a human being to say, hey, what does better look like? How do I be a better human? How do I be a better business person?
Yeah. Last one, and then we'll get into Galatea. At one point in your career, you decided to get into sales. You said, okay, this is the next step. I've been kind of doing this technical piece, and you're going to define yourself as an introvert. Most people that see you will probably say you're wrong. I'm going to say, yeah, he probably is an introvert. And getting in front of people, doing stuff like this, not really your jam. Man, you do it really well. It just looks like you're enjoying this stuff. Have things changed now? Do you enjoy them? Does it still take like a lot of energy? It's still not your jam. You'd rather be doing something else?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I appreciate the time today, and I love hanging out with you, and every conversation we have is fantastic. It's really, where do I get my energy from? What fills my bucket or batteries? I like doing research. I like working on hard problems. I like strategy. I like thinking really hard about things. That's what really gets me excited. And if I can do that for a long stretch of time, you'll definitely notice it in my energy.
Right.
Going to events and networking and this sort of transactional stuff, yeah, I get exhausted, truthfully. I come home and I'm just wiped, right?
Yeah.
It's, you just have to be that always on. Raising capital was the same way too. I think we took probably 300 meetings to put this round together, and you have to be on all the time. And
Yeah.
sometimes we're doing 4 or 5 meetings a day. It takes a lot out of you, for sure. But the more you do it, the more you learn. I'm sure I sound more comfortable. I'm using less of the ahs and ums and the filler words, like you said. But over time, it's just repetition. It's all about reps. And the more you earn the right and the more you get in the arena, the more comfortable you get with these situations, and you learn how to manage them accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. But still today, it is a not an energy adder for you. So I appreciate you being on today and doing this. But like today, I'm taking energy out of your tank, and we're going to stay to a certain timeline here for sure. But I'm taking energy out of your tank, and you'll go do other
Well,
things.
it's less of it now because I'm
Sure.
comfortable with
Yeah.
it, and I like you and I appreciate
Thank you.
you.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some things that I do now that it's like, holy, why am I doing this? And
Yeah.
I have to work really hard to think about. I only have so much energy, and I have a family and 3 kids and all of these sorts of things. How do I manage a schedule that seems to be always overflowing, with consciously, not only with time and commitment, but also energy too, because the last thing I want to do is get burnt out. And like I've said, we're running a marathon here. And when you run a marathon, I've never ran. In fact, I've never even ran probably 500 meters. But what I assume it to be, you gotta train and worry about nutrition and all of these other things that go into it.
Yes.
I'm learning how to do that with my calendar and sort of my energy and where I'm at and what I need to be working on. Think about being a salesperson as sort of an introvert. Those first couple of years in sales, that was the hardest job of my life. Super tough, right? When you have called somebody 600 times and you have to call them 601 times, and that sort of, you almost make it a game in your mind. At least I did, to say, hey, this is a sheer numbers game. It's the reps, it's the repetition. I have to commit to the process. It saved me from my good intentions to really just committing to it and holding myself accountable to it. But as you do it and as you learn it, it went from being one of the worst things in my day to something that I would actually get hyped up for and amped up for, to say, hey, I'm going to pound out 20 calls. Watch this.
Totally.
And when you start to get the results of that, which are sales and inevitably a commission check, it makes it all worth it. But you got to commit to the process for a long time and manage that wanting to go home and leave and say, this is dumb, I'm over it.
Yeah, because you don't see the return on that investment for a while. And we don't have to jump deep into it, but I think that has helped your team, because I've walked through your office, it's probably a year and a half ago now, but I think there was two sales guys sitting on desks kind of adjacent to each other with a little bit of angle. And you get like it was a box or a jar of marbles. And I was like, what is going on here? And like, tink, you just keep hearing tink, tink. And maybe you can explain that like what that marble is for. But I think that has, like, your challenges with that whole scene around sales has helped your sales teams. And you put little like gamification into it.
Yeah, when you think about human performance, it really comes down to what are the key behaviors you need to do? How do you measure those key behaviors? How do you reinforce those key behaviors? And you create these systems. And one of the things in sales is all about activity, because the leading indicator, when you think about a pipeline, you make a bunch of calls, you get some meetings, you give them proposals, and then you close deals. But what people really focus on are those deals or that revenue coming out the bottom, when you should actually really be focusing on the front end actions and the repetition. And with our sales team, one of the easiest ways to do that is you want some sort of signal that I can reinforce, or a feedback mechanism. And when I sit at my desk and I hear that marble clink in the jar, I can give them an attaboy or a good job or tell me about that. I get that auditory response where I can actually reinforce that and tell them that they're doing well. And then really what's sitting on their desk is actually a bar chart. When the start of the month, you've got one jar that's full of marbles, the other is empty. And that bar chart tells me over the month, how much are they moving from one to the other? And it tells me that pace and velocity. So sitting on their desk at all times is a dashboard that shows that bar chart. And I can tell when we're off pace, when we're on pace. I can reinforce that. We're really measuring that in real life. So it's just sort of one of the funny things that we do. And then when one of my sales guy drains the marbles, we go out and eat a steak.
Ooh,
and that's
okay.
Positive reinforcement, right? We go out, eat a steak. We talk about what did the 300 phone calls that they made to move the marbles from one jar to the other. What did we learn? What's working? What's not working? And then me as a leader, my whole job is to create more effective calls and calls that convert better from a call to a demo. So I'm really trying to coach that salesperson as they're dropping marbles and having those calls. What makes a better phone call? What are the questions we should ask? Do we listen more? All of those sorts of those things. So just one of sort of the secrets that I've
it's the little things.
With the little things, right?
Yeah. And sure, you're looking at it, but if I was that SDR or salesperson on your team, it's also right in my face every single day, staring at that, going, "Oh, okay, like what's going on here?"
Damn, does it feel good to hear that sound of a marble dropping into an empty jar, right? It becomes this almost soothing thing where people get really excited about that, and everybody on my team's picked up on it. You'll hear when my sales guy's on a roll dropping marbles, everybody's cheering him on and saying, "Josh is killing it. This is great. Keep going." So
Yeah.
It's that feedback mechanism. It's just like it would be running an Ironman or running a marathon. Somebody standing on this, the side with that sign. It's that point in the journey that you need that extra push to keep going.
Yeah.
I think little things like that are super important.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And it's good too, because I think a lot of non-salespeople on your team, most businesses, they're like, what do these salespeople do? Like, they just do lunch all the time and like just playing golf. Maybe that's some companies, but just having that tank and knowing what that is, that's good. I think that draws them into, okay, Josh, like you said, Josh is, he's getting her done for us, right? Which is good for the business.
It's such an amazing job. That commitment to that just relentless grind is what you need, and it makes good entrepreneurs, and something I think everybody should learn.
Yeah. All right, let's rock into Galatea. Maybe if you could give us, the listeners, a quick overview of Galatea, what y'all do, what problems you solve. Then I guess that comes into, you identified the opportunity for Galatea. How'd you kick things off with building the business?
Maybe I'll start there. So
Sure.
I used to work in an environmental services company. We would have facilities all across Western Canada where trucks would show up and deliver us either waste or water or commodities. And then we would treat or process that. We'd put them in pipelines, down disposal wells, or into landfills. And fantastic business. In fact, these businesses made a lot of money for a long time. Really, really great businesses. And as a salesperson that was responsible for a few facilities, it was my job to figure out how do I incent people to take me or to take their waste and show up at my facilities. It's a big line item on the OPEX for managing these field operations. It's probably one of the top 5 for every well or facility. So it's something that has relevance. Now on the flip side, it's super transactional. It's one of the largest OPEX lines, but it's made up of $1,000 loads. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to scrutinize because you have lots of transactions and a lot of difficulty. When I started to tear in and sit down with my buddies that are in operations, and I say, hey, tell me about your job. What are you trying to optimize here? They'd pull out that lease op or that operating list of expenses sorted by costs or sorted by most costs. And they'd start just cruising down the list. They'd say, people, here's how we're making operators more efficient, how they have to come out here less. Electricity, here's what we're doing around ARBs and all of the different things in the market. Chemicals, here's what we're doing around chemicals. And then they would always skip over trucking and disposal. I'd say, what's the deal here? And they'd say, well, it's just too hard. The data's all over the place, and it's transactional, and there's field relationships, and they've got the truckers they like to use. I don't like to interfere with that, so I just skip over this one and keep going down the list. So I said, okay, cool. Nobody's working on this, and it's one of the largest lines. Let me try to noodle on this and see if there's an opportunity here. Now, this whole relationship, the generator or the producer that produces the waste, the water, the commodities, they produce it at one of their sites. They call it truck. A truck comes out and picks it up and then takes it to one of these sites. So I knew that was the general workflow. I had worked on the backside of a rig, so I kind of understood how cuttings were in mud and produce water and flow back were all generated. I work now at the receiving facility, so I knew sort of what were my levers to pull as a receiving facility. What did I do? I convinced my wife to go work for a trucking company for 2 years, because in order to solve the problem, you need to know it. It needs to be your problem. So
right.
When we're for this trucking company for the better part of a couple of years, now trucking companies are these, I've met some pretty successful people in my life, and the common theme was they all own these trucking companies. One guy owns like a professional racing team. The other one owns a professional sports team.
Yes.
Like, just these crazy people. And I went, wow, these trucking companies must just be spitting out cash. And I walked into this trucking company and was the opposite. They ran their whole business in spreadsheet, had no visibility into cash flow, low margin, lots of people, lots of equipment, things broke down. You got lots of these $1,000 bills. You're trying to collect payment. And it was just like,
chaotic.
Holy, there's lots of moving parts here.
Yeah.
And they ran the whole business in Excel.
Yeah. And that's, I've seen a lot of businesses like that. Maybe it's Excel, maybe it's pieces of yellow loose leaf, and they're just running the business.
Yeah, truckers typically don't make good business people. I can tell you that. And not a fault of their own, right? They're really passionate is out there serving the client in the field. What they're not good at is back office, accounting, AP, AR, all of that chaos.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at that either, too. And I would be an amazing truck driver, be a good salesperson. I'd grow a big ass trucking company and I would run it to the ground and excel too.
Right.
Rightly
Sure.
so.
Totally. Yeah. Fair enough. So you saw this opportunity.
So what I did was I put it on my chart and I said, hey, effort and reward. And this one just had wild award. Producers in North America spend $40 billion, and that's just on waste. That's not even commodities and just trucking and managing that. Looking into mining, it was like 110 billion. Construction and agriculture is in the 400 to 500 billions. Massive amount of industry around this concept of supply and demand nodes and transportation and sort of this system. So I kind of closed my eyes and I just thought, what would perfect look like if I could zoom out 20 years into the future and say, hey, what does a beautiful system look like? What would that be? And it was all around, well, if I had a device connected to the tank and I could understand how fast these tanks are filling up, then I could really figure out when to get a truck to the tank at the right time. If the truck showed up at the tank, could I look into the market and look at all the optionality and the heuristics and constraints around all the facilities, costs, wait times, capacities. And if I could look into the tanks at all these facilities and figure out how full they are and when they've got room for these loads, or look into the pipeline and look at nominations and all of these variables, while inevitably I could just get the trucks to go to the right place at the right time and go to the right facility, and then all the tickets just automatically get approved and completed and sent into accounts payable. And as the drivers do work, money just shows up in the bank accounts. Like,
Brilliant world.
wow, that sounds cool. And then I started to look out into the industry, and people had done little parts of this.
Mm-hmm.
None of this is new and none of this is foreign, because nobody's really stitched it all together and built a solution that not only adds value for the oil and gas company or the producer, but also adds value for the receiver and the transporter. When you create these beautiful systems, they need to have value to get everybody to adopt it and start using it. And I thought, hey, this is a really cool opportunity where I can not only help the producer, but help my friends at the trucking company and my old job at the receiver. We could really create this beautiful system where these trucks would take the path of least capital or environmental resistance and just start making better decisions. And that's where we had the conviction to start Galatea.
Makes sense. So in summary, the opportunity was, we'll call it like backend optimization with data, like just making processes easier, moving it to a digital world, and then multiple stakeholder buy-in on a process. So everything makes it easier for all these different stakeholders on the custody transfer process. And then I think the real magic becomes better decision making. It's like what needs to happen when to optimize X, whatever X is.
One, the last thing that I think is the most important part is really around automation. How do you make this happen so that the people that are currently in the role today don't have to spend so much time and effort managing, sort of the circus that the current workflow is?
Right.
I think a lot of software solutions, they just start adding more buttons and more features, and then all of a sudden they have to have these like user conferences and training, and they have to have all of this support material, and this is how you use it. And I really have worked hard with the team and kind of pounded the table to say, hey, the end game of our solution is no solution at all. I want the tanks to be able to dispatch their own trucks. I want the trucks to show up at the right time. I want the trucking company system to feed in all of this. I just want this all to go away so that the operator out in the field that works for the oil and gas company looks out his window, sees a truck showing up, sees it leaving, and just goes, cool. Don't know where it goes.
Yeah,
exactly. Don't care. I just know it's handled and dealt with. And we spend a bunch of time at Galatea trying to figure out how do we create a system that's really no system at all. And that is hard because you're constantly fighting a world of people that want more features and optionalities with having to design product where it's wildly simple. Look at Apple. If you use an iPhone, you can't customize it. There is no, they really ruled design and try to keep everything just wildly simple, which created a lot of adoption.
Yeah.
My grandparents run iPhones, which is crazy, and have minimal issues with them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's because they didn't sacrifice that simplicity. And
Yeah. That's extremely
we're
important. Yeah.
we're interfacing. Our app is used by a lot of transporters, field people, where simplicity is so much more valuable than a button to do this or that or show this or a chart. So, we spend a lot of time thinking about, for every feature we add, how do we remove two? For every single step in the process, how do we automate it more? How do we get it at the end of the day so somebody shows up and there's really nothing for them to do? The system just knows and is intelligent enough to walk that workflow right through to
Awesome.
the end.
It's and I came from the tech world in oil and gas, and I'd say it's rare that I've heard that analogy and focus. Two follow ups to that is, one, do you guys lead conversations with that talk track with customers, and are they receptive to it, or do they like kind of roll their eyes at first because they're hearing it other places? Like the
Yeah,
simplicity, like it's not a big solution. It's just like, we come in and it's going to fix these things. You don't have to get trained and do like quarterly training to make sure your people stay up to speed on it.
well, we learned this lesson the hard way, where we brought in a system that didn't really have these automation features. And what ended up happening is we created more complexity in the field. They looked at our solution and said, great, you're saving us money. But at the end of the day, I got to spend an extra half an hour going through all of this sort of stuff. I used to manage this process, Chad, with complacency. I just wouldn't look at the tickets. I wouldn't care.
Right.
Now you showed me why I should care. But because I now know I should care, I actually have to do something about it. I got to get on the phone and make a bunch of phone calls. I got to do all of this back and forth. So they're really weighing, complacency and just ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah.
Or, the solution that
work.
sort of shine the lights on it.
Yeah.
Well, how do you skip that step? You take them back to complacency. But if you take them back to complacency, it's now my job in the software to provide that transparency and oversight, to actually do that accountability, so that the operator can trust that the system is providing that oversight. And then really the people in the field, their job doesn't change at all. They continue to just let the machine run.
Got it. Okay. And then my second follow up, I think it's still relevant. So those operators that are out there, and I think this is common, whether it's oil and gas or other industries where you're bringing in technology, whether it's just, good programming, whether it's AI, because it's a hot topic these days, there is a real concern of the operator or the worker that this is going to replace my job. If I can just sip my coffee and watch that truck come in and go and everything's done and the program's checking to identify errors, are they at risk?
I think so many CEOs and leaders are trained to say, no, John, this is going to displace people to more high value stuff. But truthfully, yeah, absolutely. It's going to completely automate that aspect of their job. But really, when you think about the mandate to a producer, when you think about behavior, when you've got a field operator, what is the biggest impact or the most important thing that a field operator can do? Well, it's actually increasing production. You've got this well. How do I get more oil out of that well? And what I would want to do if I was running a team is have their 100% focus on increasing the amount of oil coming out of that well, like obsessant focus. It's not the back office stuff. It's not being a secretary or an admin. It's not managing tickets. It's not filling out forms. It's not any of these other things. I want them to be laser focused at increasing production from a well.
Totally.
What do we do at Galatea? I'm going to give you the time back so you can actually operate your wells, so you can actually increase your production. In fact, I'm going to give you the time back so that you can have dinner with your daughter every single night, so that you're not stuck there filling out forms and paperwork. I want to automate them out of a job. I want people to do things that have more relevance or importance.
And it creates an opportunity for that operator too, no? Assuming they have some ambition, is if all of a sudden, because of these new solutions over the last several years that have been implemented, I now have 40% more time, I would expect good employers are going to say, hey, Sally, the operator, we need you to now, here's a few options, maybe. Here are a few options, get trained up more to take on new opportunities. I would expect. Is that what you see or think is happening, or is it something
Well, and
different?
honestly, John, when I grew up as a kid, my dad had an old beater truck that we would fill with garbage and go to the dump. Now today, I wheel a black bin out to my curb and I walk back into the house.
Yeah.
A garbage truck completely automated my job, and I'm 100% okay with that.
Yeah,
In
sure.
fact, I gladly pay for that and very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
If you could figure out a way that my lawn would cut itself, I would also very much appreciate that too. So I think there's certain jobs and certain ways to look at this where people will appreciate if you can automate it. I think you need to automate it, but also ensure that you're optimizing it as well. You need to connect it to an intelligent system that can look at the variables, especially something that's got a lot of risk and constraint to it. Um, if you can do those sorts of things, I think people will gladly that and also make them look like the rock star and make them look like the hero of the story. It's not Galatea. The
Yeah.
rock star at the field who did this and automated, made everyone's life easier and saved you all the money isn't us. It's Steve. And
Right.
Steve did a great job. So learning how to tell that story and make them look like a hero through the automation.
Yeah, and that is it's a good point, right? You're the enabler, the tool maybe that's
Yeah.
being used, but yeah, it takes the people to adopt and run with it. Okay, I know we are getting tight on time, so I want to jump ahead on a few things. Your full story. I'm breaking the rules here, which is like the
Yeah, let's
experiment of
go.
life, right? So your full story is on a few other podcasts. So if people want to dive into that, they can do that. Thinking about Galatea, and you guys are, correct me if I'm wrong, focused on predominantly oil and gas, 100% oil and gas. Have you broached over to other industries?
Yeah, we're heading towards a mine right now
Okay.
and really getting some understanding of what that looks like, what that feels like, and some of the challenges. But primarily today, we're oil and gas focused.
Great. Okay. And then we have the energy transition, and that's going to happen either next year. We're going to be off of oil and gas, just working with batteries and electrons from the sun, or in 75 years we'll almost be there, somewhere within there. Right. That's the right answer. So, how are you thinking about that? Is this some risk to Galatea? Is there an opportunity? Like, should you be thinking about moving into the electron world somehow with your business? How are you thinking about the energy transition?
That's a good one. When you think about what we do at Galatea, we're really helping commodity businesses with antiquated supply chains move products or waste streams, whatever it is, commodities, from supply to demand nodes. And that really fits oil and gas. It also fits mining. It fits agriculture. It fits bulk chemicals, commodities. It's a world of use cases. I just like working for the companies that make a lot of money and are really inefficient, which I haven't met many companies that make more money than oil and gas companies and are more inefficient. So that's kind of where we landed first, and our background and expertise. When we think about energy transition, I think the story that is going to be more prevalent into the future is really around the consumption of electron side. When you think about US energy demand, it's been pretty flat since 2007.
Mm-hmm.
It's lifted off that line and it's bending exponential with data centers. If
Yes.
you simply look at the amount of GPUs, A100s that NVIDIA is spitting out today, and you look at the power consumption of one of those things, if you just simply made the assumption that every single one of those is going to be powered, turned on, plugged in,
Be a
as a
problem.
society, we've got a big problem.
Yeah.
And as a consumer with three little kids, we shop at Costco. And a while ago, I was there with my wife and I saw blueberries,
Yeah.
a big pint of blueberries for $3. And right underneath it, it said, product of Chile. And I know where Chile is, and it's not anywhere close to Canada.
Yeah.
And I realized that it must have taken an insane amount of energy to grow these blueberries in Chile, pick them, package them, put them on a boat or an airplane, get them to Calgary, Alberta, and sell them for $3 a pint. As a consumer, I should look at that and go, man, these are probably environmentally really bad blueberries. I
Yeah.
bought 2 packs of blueberries because my kids love blueberries, right?
Yeah. And at $3 a pint, I thought they were $30 a pint, but yeah, totally. We've got a full fridge
As
of them.
consumers and somebody who loves using ChatGPT and Gemini and all of these other LLMs, I don't know that I'm conscious of the environmental impact or the social impact or the energy impact that these new technologies are going to have and really start to be relevant.
Yeah.
I know with the cost of inflation and how much money we spend on groceries and all of these sorts of things, it's hard for me. And I can't imagine, I live a pretty good life. It's hard for my family. I can't imagine what disadvantaged populations
Yeah.
or people who don't live that same luxury that we do are going through today and are about to go through in the future around energy security.
Can't agree more. Like, I think that, like, we can probably say, based off of data that comes out from the Canadian government, the average Canadian, think about that, just the average Canadian, that's going to be extremely challenging for. So yeah, it's going to impact a lot of people.
No, I also took historical geology in school, and I love thinking about time scales that are eons and long periods of time. I've taken my kids out to the Drumheller Royal Tyrrell Museum, which talks a lot about fossils and prehistoric times. And on the wall, it says the 6th mass extinction event due to climate. And when you think about Saskatchewan, they've got a massive evaporate deposit, which is caused from an inland ocean, entire ocean evaporating and depositing hundreds of feet of salt. Listen, climate does change.
Yeah.
I hope this doesn't scare you.
Yeah.
Historically, it has changed so much so that it's caused mass extinction events where 90% of all living species on Earth have died. And you know what? If you look at that time scale, we're overdue for the next one.
Yeah.
So I think as society, we need to work on technologies that are going to help us outlive the next extinction event, whether we cause the catastrophic climate change or a series of volcanic eruptions or meteor, or these sorts of options out there in the world over the geologic record that have happened in the past. They will happen again.
Yeah.
There's some really cool companies working on genetically modified plants that help plants grow better and produce more yield with less water, drought resistance.
Lower
I think
temps.
Canada, where we live, will see a lot of immigration because our climate is going to withstand better our infrastructure. We've got lots of water, we've got access to energy. So I think we should be mindful of that as a society and really think hard and figure out how do we make that work. I think Canada has a bunch of resources, not just oil and gas, but also mining, uranium, agriculture, that as a society, we need to figure out our role in the world.
Yeah.
And how do we deliver natural gas to China so they don't have to build coal plants? How do we, pick up for Ukraine and start delivering flour to the world? How do we make sure that the world has enough uranium to run small modular reactors, which will start to solve some of the energy problems?
Totally.
As a country, we need to start figuring that out and really owning the opportunity to provide those commodities with the best environmental, social governance, financial policy.
Yeah. Which all of that is extremely exciting. Like, we have the opportunity, if we choose to take it, without a bunch of red tape. We'll just say that in general. With our resources, with our education, smart population, to be able to execute on that, right? Is how do we help the rest of the world get to where we need to be with all of what we have? So yeah, it's interesting. So in summary, you are, like, obviously you're thinking about this stuff. Someone, a CEO that is focused on oil and gas with your business, you're thinking about the broader landscape. What else is happening? How do we play a part in that? And I know you've done a lot of talks, a couple down in, might have been last year, late last year, down in Texas, talking about some of this stuff as well. So listeners, check out those chats with Chad as well.
I feel like I'm launching a political platform because I'm constantly having these conversations. But when you think about humanity's evolution, I think we're only ever going to consume more energy. If you read Michio Kaku's book, Transforming Humanity, he talks about sort of the arc of energy consumption. It doesn't end.
Yeah.
Like, it gets literally to the point where he talks about a Dyson sphere, which wraps a star in solar panels, essentially, and captures all of the energy from a star. So it's just this kind of mind wander to get you from where we are today, which is a very impoverished energy society, to a society that has fully bought into AI and virtual reality and all of these other systems that consume way more energy than we're conscious about today. And how do we design systems to deliver that securely?
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. Now I've got something to go look up as well. I know we've got maybe 10 minutes. You got a big call. You got a business to keep growing. So let me hit on a couple last big ones. I'm going to be selfish because I want to get some ticks. I don't want ticks. Tips and tricks. I'm not even going to edit that out. That's great. I'm sure there's, really influential people within your world. Maybe you want to touch on that. But wanted to focus on kind of to exit here, thinking about your business, and typically the listeners are people that are looking to buy a business for this podcast, as well as mostly the ideal listener is the small business owner, someone that's been running a business for a while. So thinking about your business, running it over the last 5 years, the challenges that you've gone through, what are some of the real big wins that you've implemented? And I'm going to give you a lot of space here. So take it wherever you want to, whether it's from a culture and people standpoint. Is there one big thing that was like, man, this helped the business and the people and our trajectory so much? And then maybe on the other side with more of the process, like good process. You've commented a few times during this chat about processes and laid things out. Is there one process that you've implemented or two that has really impacted positively Galatea?
One of the things I think is super important is to match culture with business. If you want to listen to a really cool podcast, a deep dive with NVIDIA from Acquired, Jensen Huang really talks about he's architected his culture to fit his business. They build chips, and their culture is actually and sort of hierarchy and how they manage their business is all around how you would build a chip, because it's the people in the business that relate to it. When you think about what we do at Galatea, we serve oil companies, which are one sort of persona, but we also serve truckers. And we've weaved our culture around being able to fit with people that can service both of those. And it's a very, very unique culture. And I think a lot of people will, if you buy a business or you walk into a business, I worked at lots of these big billion-dollar companies, and I don't remember what their core values were. I've seen them on the wall. I know which wall they were at, but I have no idea what they were.
Right.
If you can really align your culture, your core values, your mission, your vision with the business that you serve, it really becomes relevant and amplified, and you don't have to worry about people remembering it because they will live it. They will be that when they walk down the street.
Yeah. And on that point, did you, when you when you put together and put on a piece of paper and everyone was living the culture, was this what Chad said? You're like, okay, these are like the 3 areas of like culture that I think about personally, or values that kind of maybe come into it. And was that the starting point, or how did Galatea's culture come about the way that you define it? And I've seen your guidebook for the business. Awesome, yeah. By the way, brilliant stuff. So how did it come about?
Yeah, we have a culture guidebook, and when it was just Chad, the culture was Chad. That's just who I am. That's just how we act, right? And I've sort of picked up. I've worked for a lot of bad cultures, so I knew exactly what we didn't want to do, and maybe almost over-index towards that. But one of the things that I've worked really hard to do was pick up on the little idioms and the little nuggets of wisdom from all the people at Galatea. We have a Slack channel, and I call it Guidebook. And if I'm at a presentation, or I'm out at a course, or we're having beers with the team, and somebody says something that I think is really cool and attaches to our culture, I throw it in that channel, and then I revisit this guidebook every 18 months roughly, and we rewrite it, and our culture evolves to pick up sort of the threads of all the different people. You'll see quotes from the people that we work with in our guidebook, and our culture is really shifting and becoming more diverse as we add more diversity to our team. Sure. I think culture isn't something that you should nail on the wall and say, that's the culture, just look at that there.
Totally. It's alive.
It should be something that's alive and dynamic. And the more alive and the more dynamic, the more you water it, the more you feed it, the more healthy and the more fun it gets, for sure.
Yes.
We have a work from anywhere whenever policy. I don't care if you show up or if you don't. But when people stop showing up, that's my indicator that something's broken here. I need to fix it. We've got something happening that's making somebody not want to be here.
Right.
I want people to feel left out if they're not in the office because we're having such a good time and it just feels so good to be there.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my marbles on the jar where I measure it and am conscious of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, good way to look at it. Make sure there's always FOMO. Everyone wants to be there.
Right.
Okay, last one. This is, I'm going to give you an option. I'm going to let you go easy here today because I've enjoyed this and we've gone everywhere. So I always have some interesting question at the end, and I usually use this billboard one. We're not doing that. You're not getting the easy one. There is one that is extremely hard. It's always been on the sheet for people to choose, and they never choose it. I didn't even give you an option.
Give me the hard one. Let's
okay,
roll.
The hard one
I'm all in.
The hard cue is, what is an unusual habit that you love? Whether that's like, you just love it. It's good for your personal life. It's good for the business life. One unusual habit. PG, because I can't put this as an 18-year-old podcast.
Man, I dig it. What is an unusual habit that I absolutely love? Okay, here it is. You ready for it?
Let's rock.
I purposely seek out and follow people on LinkedIn that have very opposing views than I do. And I try as hard as I can to read their posts more than I read anybody else's posts and consider their perspective. I'm also not afraid to challenge it. And I try really hard. I think humans, we need to learn how to debate again and learn how to be vulnerable to change opinions and thoughts and perspective. One of the guys I follow is Justin Trudeau's ex-right-hand man, used to work for the World Wildlife Foundation. I'm blanking on his name, but has a totally different perspective than I have.
Sure.
And shares some content that sometimes I disagree with, but sometimes I think, yeah, he's heading in the right general direction. And I try to, give him, here's my voice coming from the energy industry. I've worked across many countries and sort of here's my perspective too. And the discourse that results in it is actually awesome. And I think more people need to be willing to get into those conversations. Always be respectful. Always be mindful.
100%.
And at the end of the day, the goal here is to bend your perspective and bend your understanding. But too much social media is polarizing, right? It tries to, if you're on the right side, it tries to really pull you to the right side. If you're on the left, I work consciously hard to make sure I'm equally as pulling in the left perspective as I get from sort of my general influence. I love it.
I'm going to have to push people just to answer the damn question from now on, because that was a brilliant one. And it kind of rings to something that a good friend of mine said the other day, which was everybody's perspective is their reality. I think I'm getting that right, Brett. And that's essentially what you're doing, is you're broadening the perspective, or at least data that's going into it.
I've had a tough time getting my head wrapped around Bitcoin. I've had a tough time getting my head wrapped around hydrogen as a fuel. I've had a hard time getting my head wrapped around the economics of solar panels. But I've been following people that have those perspectives, and they've really helped me figure out, where does this make sense? What was I missing? What do they see that I don't see? And it's changed my perspective.
Awesome. Great way to end the chat today. So thanks, Chad. And I will let you go. I know you got a meeting in about 4 minutes. I know you'll rock it, get that new business, whatever it is. Yeah, I just want to say thanks. It was great to have you on. And we did go everywhere. This was different than what we typically do, but I think it was great. So thanks again, man.
Going on podcast hiatus. Look for me in 2027.
2027. All right, Chad. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Hey, that was great. Thank you.